Okay, and we're live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brockton Writers Series for July 13th, 2022. Thank you very much for being here. To start off, we're going to acknowledge that the Brockton organizers do our work on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat nations, and most recently the Massacres of the Credit River. And we know that colonization, genocide, and racism have impacted Indigenous peoples historically and also today, and that settlers, including myself, have a responsibility to make space at events such as ours for Indigenous voices, and that we all share the responsibility to critically understand and challenge forces of systemic oppression. So this includes recognition of how our ancestors contributed to these legacies of colonization and how systems today still perpetuate colonization and anti-Indigenous racism. It means we have to take action to write our elected officials and pressure them to provide clean drinking water on reservations, to act on the recommendations of the TRC, and you know what? Give some land back. We'd also like to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter, and that we will continue to feature and center Black and Indigenous voices, other people of color, and other underrepresented groups in our series. And all of this is included directly in our mandate. And thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. And please, if you're here, like and subscribe. Today's lineup will include a guest speaker with a brief Q&A, and then our 4 readers, followed by a group Q&A for them as well. Each presentation will be a little shorter than when we were in person, and we will skip the break. Please type your questions into the YouTube chat box as they occur to you. We will collect them during the Q&As. There is a little bit of a lag between us and you, so it really helps us if you type out your questions as they come to you. Now I'll turn it over to Emily.
Brockton Writers Series was founded in November of 2009, which means we've been active in the Toronto literary scene for over a decade. Our Brockton Writers Series volunteers are pleased to welcome Ellen Crowley to the team. Ellen will be attending Centennial College's publishing program in the fall, and we're delighted she'll be joining us as we bid farewell to Hannah Amdemichael, longtime Brockton volunteer whose tireless efforts on the blog have provided writers with an incredible collection of work and a fantastic historical overview of the writers we've hosted over the years. We'll miss you, Hannah, but look forward to hosting you as a reader very soon. The remaining Brockton volunteers are Jen Albert, to whom we're offering congratulations on her recent wedding in France. Welcome back, Jen. Nancy K. Clark, Dorianne Emerton, Sonia Patare, and I'm Emily Sanford. If you're interested in joining this amazing team, check in with us after the readings. We'd love to hear from you. We would like to acknowledge deep thanks the continued support of the Ontario Arts Council who make this series possible. We'd also like to thank the brilliant team of designers who participated in the Association for Registered Graphic Designers not-for-profit Designathon earlier this year to come up with some new branding for the Brockton Writers Series. We've been rolling it out over the last few months, as you might have noticed. It's pretty spiffy. Finally, our sincere thanks to you, our audience, for being here with us tonight. We're glad you're tuning in. Now on to Brockton's guest speaker. Anna Lee-Popham is an MFA candidate in creative writing at the University of Guelph and a graduate of the Writers Studio at Simon Fraser University and University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies Creative Writing Certificate, where she received the Janice Colbert Poetry Award. Anna co-hosts the Emerging Writers Reading Series. Welcome, Anna.
Hello all, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me okay. It's really such a pleasure to get to be here with you all. Thanks so much to the Brockton Writers Series for inviting me into the space to do this brief presentation about creative writing programs. I wanted to sort of underline the capacity that I come in as the co-host of the Emerging Writers Reading Series. So it's very exciting to get to be in another space where writers are sharing their work, and you just really value these spaces where we get to support each other. I'm going to share a PowerPoint to take us through this this presentation, and I'm really hoping to respond to any questions that might come up. I wanted to underline that this is one person's perspective on MFAs and certificate programs and individual workshops. It feels really important to start with a recognition that there are many, many different ways that we can go about learning the craft of writing. These formalized programs are only one, and many people really focus on more self-directed learning, and I want to really, amp that up and recognize the value of that. Just to give a bit of an overview of what I'm planning on doing in this brief time, just look at these 3 different approaches to learning creative writing: the MFA program, certificate programs or continuing education programs, and individual workshops. I'll zone in a little bit on the MFA in creative writing, talk a little bit about why I did it, and some specifics around the University of Guelph program, and then just offer some general suggestions of what folks might want to look for in programs or workshops or an MFA program, and what you might want to think through if you decide to apply to an MFA, and then some resources. There'll be a bit of a Q&A at the end. I wanted to open with some advice from Dion and Harriet Mullen. There's a very fantastic YouTube conversation that's recorded on YouTube. It's called "These Tyrannical Times: Poetry as Liberatory." I'm not actually able to. Liberatory Poetry as Undoing. And from that, in that conversation, Dion says, so the question was, what do you suggest to aspiring poets? And it was framed within the context of a context of protest and rebellion. And Dion said, write, and read the tradition you are in, read everything and just write it. It's important and it's urgent. Write till 4 in the morning, until 6 in the morning. Do whatever kind of work you need to do so that you can do that work, by which she meant the writing work. We need that work. We need this production of our life. Harriet Mullen added, you do not need permission. You give yourself permission. Your voice has value. And I wanted to just start with that because these programs can come off as barriers. And I want to just make sure that we talk about them within the context of how do we write? How do we just make sure that we write whatever the strategy is that we use? If folks, okay, I don't think I quite realized that we would be YouTube based. So the idea of this was that if folks could put in the chat, which maybe you can on YouTube, why you're interested in writing programs, if that works with the technology, that would be great, just to give me a bit of a feeling for why people might be interested in an MFA or a certificate program or workshops. If you're inspired to and technically able to, if you just plop that into the YouTube piece, that would be great. So just very quick overview. So individual workshops, the way that I'm thinking about them, they're often, a one-off workshop, could be as little as an hour in length, or perhaps you combine them into a series of workshops so that it's multi-month. The cost depends entirely on each individual program. Some examples in Toronto: Sister Writes, Firefly Creative Writing in the East End of Toronto. Catapult is an online, offers online workshops, I think US based. Certificate programs are often developed through a continuing education program like the University of Toronto, or the university that's now called Metropolitan, or Simon Fraser University has a program. And they often group a series of courses into an organized certificate. So at Metropolitan, it's now 3, at U of T, it's 7. The cost depends entirely on the program. You can complete it at the Writer's Studio at Simon Fraser University. You can complete in 10 or 11 months. Sometimes there's a cutoff of the time period that you need to complete it by, say, 5 years. And then an MFA is a cohorted multi-year, often 2 or 3 years, in the States sometimes as many as 4, program where you're with a set group of students. In Canada, University of Guelph, UBC, and University of Victoria, I believe, University of Victoria now has a program, and University of New Brunswick has a creative nonfiction program. And so I think what's important to think why you might want to do any of these programs, and to think through what best helps you accomplish those goals. And so I would suggest that any of these options will let you, if your goals are related to developing a writing practice, which is often why people might come into some of these kinds of workshops or programs, that depending on how you approach the program, this could be an opportunity to do that. If you want to develop a writing community, that any of these approaches, there's sometimes even not as much right now, though possibly through the Toronto Public Library, there's writers groups as well that really offer an amazing opportunity to develop community and a writing community. If you want to learn specific skills and you really feel clear about what those skills are, learn to write, learn about line breaks in poetry, or learn about a really specific experimental fiction, or that you can really look for how to develop those very specific skills, and that any of these approaches would allow you to do that. Teaching qualifications, the MFA is the program that would allow you to graduate with that, with a specific teaching qualification. That said, if you have publishing behind you, an MFA is often not required. So I think that it's when approaching any of these possibilities or these strategies for learning your craft, just really thinking through what are your goals and how can each approach help you achieve them. So very quickly, the MFA, I engaged in the MFA because I do want to teach, and so the MFA allows you to do that. I wanted to be in a concentrated community, and it was a chance to really build my confidence as a writer. But again, I do not think that an MFA is required for really almost any of those goals. The University of Guelph program offers a focus. You can focus on the genre of poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, or drama. There's a reading-based course, 2 reading-based courses each fall, one that's called Writers on Writing that really focuses on the craft of writing, and then one that's Writers on the World that really looks at what the social and political role of writers is. The workshop, you have to take at least 3 workshops, though you can take more. So over the 2-year program, you have to take at least 3 workshops, although you can take more. And there's a mentorship that's right in the summer semester of the first year. The thesis, you write a thesis to culminate the degree, which happens from January till the summer of your final year, and then defend that thesis in August of the final year. Deadline for applications is the end of the year. I strongly suggest, if you're interested in it and it feels like it does help you work towards your writing goals, that you consider applying. Want to share a little bit about my experience. I feel like I came into the MFA program with a very loose assembly of writing, and I feel like I'm coming out as a writer. So I think it really does, a role that an MFA program can provide is really helping one's writing cohere, and it certainly did that for me. I'm going to share a couple of links and some resources for information about the program if you're interested. And then I just wanted to end with a couple of suggestions. I feel like this is like I'm speed dating the MFA program presentation, so I apologize for the speed of this. So just wanted to say that, when you look at a program, just sort of reiterate what I've been saying, that I really suggest that you think about, what are your goals as a writer, and where are you in your trajectory as a writer? And so what kind of program will best help you work towards those goals? And then think about, the cost and the time commitment. What is something that's a format that's really going to help you work towards your personal writing related goals? Something that was really a draw for me in terms of the MFA program was that it allowed me to access instructors whose work I felt like challenged me and pushed me outside of my comfort zone in terms of my writing, and also in terms of my political understanding of what writing does. And so that might be something that you want to look for, is who's doing interesting work that you might have access to. And then in terms of approaching the MFA application process, specifically for the University of Guelph, they look really at the writing submission. So really thinking through, what is it that you're doing with the submission that you're sending in? Why are you sending that work in? What do you think it's doing with language? And really thinking that part through. Lastly, I wanted to plug an upcoming event and call for submission. The Emerging Writers Reading Series has a deadline. We're going to extend to July 30th for our reading series for, or our season for 2022-2023. And we are also going to be at Bougon Bloor. Some readers are going to be there from the last season this Saturday at 3:30 to 6:30. So please consider joining us. I think I'm seeing a question in this chat. Should I go ahead, or maybe Emily?
Yeah, so I can introduce the question for you. Thank you so much. This is really important and informative, I guess, information. But yes, thank you so much for that. So we have a question here. Do MFAs prepare writers for the business side of writing? It seems so many writers are shocked to see how heavily they must invest in the promo and marketing side, not to mention the submission and query minefield.
Whoa, good question. I personally do not find that the MFAs prepare writers sufficiently whatsoever. I think that they're trying to more. I think that also just in terms, a lot of writers want to be teachers. And so there is a shift in the MFA programs towards really, focus on the pedagogy of teaching writing, which I think is also a really interesting shift. There are speakers who come in and talk about, the lived experience of being writers, and certainly the mentorship allows you access to that. But I think there's a lot of room for growth in that area around MFA. I think that's a really great question and really legitimate concern.
Okay, we also have someone saying that they took a course through Flying Books. That was another one. And then I personally, I'm deadline driven. So I love workshops and classes that nudge me along to a deadline. Because I work as well as writing, I like to have a deadline to make me actually sit down and do it instead of attend to all the other family things that I have to do in life. So those are just comments about those. Do we have any other questions from our folks in the audience? How long did it take you to do your certificate at the University of Toronto?
The full 5 years, because I had a child right in the middle, which both was this very generative moment, but not people experience this, I think, in very different ways, but I certainly experienced it in all of what I'm writing is so exquisitely phenomenal. And then I would look back, a month later and be like, oh no, it wasn't actually, or I would have a lot of different, perspective that once the endorphins and everything were running at a different pace. So it really slowed down my process. But it was very, very helpful. The certificate programs I think are very interesting because they really allow you to select the specific courses that you're interested in, and possibly the Metropolitan actually has a publishing certificate that I think really does look a lot more at the business side of writing and editing, and so I think that you can also be really selective in terms of the specific direction that you want to take your writing.
That's right. And Centennial has a publishing program too. And then Simon Fraser has a fairly famous one as well. So, that's great. We have another question. Aside from craft building, does an MFA open specific doors to employment? I know you mentioned teaching as well, but are there other things too?
Yeah, it does. It does give you access to a whole network. And so just like any other, moments where you get access to the community, I certainly feel like it's given me access to a community of writers that I wouldn't otherwise access. And so, when I think about wanting to, say for someone who wants to go towards publishing, that, I would know who I should talk to in terms of who's working at the different poetry related publishing presses. And so I think that it opens doors in the ways that you get to be a part of a community. And I think that, I feel much more confident. I'm an editor, and so I feel much more confident in my capacity as an editor because I really worked one-on-one and in small groups with writers where I was receiving the teaching. And so I feel much more able to then engage other writers in that same capacity because I've watched folks who I feel are experts, teach writing. And so I feel like I'm like, okay, I really understand, how pedagogically how we do this. So whether it's, specifically teaching or other fields where you get to engage with people, like as an editor, where it's, smaller groups or one-on-one, I think that it does, it certainly provides those opportunities, and in addition to the networking opportunities. But it can be, if you're approaching it from an economic standpoint, it can be difficult to legitimize, to rationalize engaging in an MFA because it certainly does not, you do not come out being like, oh, great, there's a lot of job opportunities that I would not otherwise have had access to. That said, if you're coming at it from, wanting to strengthen your craft and continue to pursue, a career as a writer, I think that it's very valuable.
Okay, another question. What do you see next? Once you have an MFA, do you think you'll be taking one-off courses, or do you think you'll be doing, where will you look for that kind of thing to just stay in it?
That is such a good question. Yeah, I feel very, now I feel much more clear about what I do want to learn. And so I think now it's a matter of, looking at places like Catapult or Flying Books and really going, but with much more specificity, being able to be clear about the skills that I feel like I want to strengthen in my writing practice. And really want to look around more. Yeah, I really appreciate that question.
Okay, I think that's all our questions from our folks. Do we have any other questions from our other readers tonight that we can share? We've been contributing all along, but I just wanted to get one last plug in case you had any before we move along. Okay, I think that's it then. Anna, thank you so much for all this information. This has been really valuable. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. It's so great to get to be here.
Now that we have our very own Brockton Writers Series YouTube channel, we need your help to make it official. Please, please like and subscribe. Usually at this point, if we were in person, we would hand around a picture for pay what you can donations to help support Brockton and our writers. But patching a picture through a camera kind of doesn't work. So we have a PayPal account that will be in the chat. And if you're able to spare a few dollars for our brilliant writers, please throw it to our PayPal. Also, we value your opinion. So we'd like you to take our survey and suggest topics for future guest speakers that we would like to see, amongst other things. So please take our very brief BWS survey and let us know your thoughts. We'll post that link also in the chat. And now for our readers. Again, please type your questions in the chat as they occur to you. We will start off with Sheila Madonna Mortel Salvador, a writer and spoken word artist whose work focuses on cultural pride, healing, and self-love. Born in the Philippines, she is grateful and honored to currently be living in Toronto, the place in the water where the trees are standing. Her work has been featured in the Minerva and the Town Crier Puritan literary magazines, as well as Fieldways, a Scarborough anthology. She is currently doing her master's at OISE in adult education and is working on a book about her family history and the Massacre of Manila. Take it away, Sheila.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll be sharing two small pieces representing two generations of women based on the story that I'm writing about the Massacre of Manila, which is the most unacknowledged but heinous crime that was committed during World War II. So here goes. The first piece is called Long Hair, Small Noses. I'm dreaming of a different place, of a time when my chest does not hurt from the weight of smoke and sadness, when my eyes are not caked with mud and blood, and I'm not hearing the sounds of ammunition, of houses breaking like bones, of men crying like babies, and skin ripping like cloth. I see myself a little older, hair down to my waist, just like grandma, my skin a little lighter, my nails long and shiny like my mother's, but painted pink, not like the glassy red that she likes. Maybe my face will not be as round anymore, so my eyes will look bigger, and my lips, my nose will not be as fat and wide. I see myself kissing my first love under the tamarind trees at recess. My classmates, tattletales, will tell the nuns, but it'll be worth the 5 strikes of the wooden ruler on my hand by the teacher and the slap from my mother to touch his cheeks while he holds my hand. His breath will taste like cigarettes and chiclets, and I will feel his heart beating through his school shirt, stiff with cornstarch and sweat. He is perfect with his slightly crooked teeth, dimples. He will come to my window every night with his guitar to sing me to sleep, bring me sweet buns his mother makes and bouquets of chrysanthemums and hibiscus flowers from his backyard. On days when it's too hot to touch, we will eat wild watermelons under grandma's mango and guava trees that look naked without her laundry hanging to dry. He will not be the one I marry, but I will name my son after him. My daughters will look like grandma, long limbs, small hips, hair that grows without any effort past her shoulders, small noses, brown eyes that turn green when they face the sun. Smart like my mother, but kind and thoughtful. Maybe it can happen. The fires might soon cease and the red flood will stop flowing. My body can be put back together and my heart will keep beating. Help will come, right? So second piece is the piece from Fieldways, The Bad Trip Motel. The first time I took acid was a week after I left home when I moved into some motel on Kingston Road, the one beside the KFC, across from a Chinese restaurant where I bought my dinners most nights. I always ordered the combo B, which came with a hot and sour soup instead of the spring rolls. That was just gently fried cabbage and rice paper. I'm Filipino, and we make our spring rolls, which we call lumpia, with perfectly seasoned ground pork and water chestnuts that we deep fry to crispy perfection. Those, it was delicious on its own or dipped in banana ketchup or vinegar with pepper sauce. Those bland rolls from the restaurants were just simply unacceptable. They made me think of home, made me miss my family, hungry for my mom's cooking. My parents did not kick me out. I left because I thought they were too strict and unreasonable. I just dropped out of high school. All I did was hang out in basements with my friends, watching movies, binging on 99-cent chips from Byway and chocolates we stole from Morningside Mall. I made $6.85 per hour at Taco Bell and gave most of it to my boyfriend Slim, who had 3 other girlfriends. Slim was a player, the original fuckboy. He was everything. I gave him my virginity and fidelity. He gave me chlamydia and nothing for Valentine's Day or ever. But in my head, those girls were just slutty bitches. I was his number one, and eventually he would give me his undying love and monogamy. He would get discovered and be even more famous than JC because he would be more dope then snow and vanilla ice combined, would make lots of money and babies, tour the world, have a condo in Chicago where his father lived, a modest mansion at Wasaga Beach with a wraparound porch overlooking the water, where I would spend my days writing bestsellers and watching our children build sand castles with their grandparents, guarded by our fierce but gentle Rottweilers, Kane and Rocky. But Slim kept straying, no matter how much I loved him, how much money I gave him or spent on him. It was not part of the plan for us to share a 2-bedroom motel that smelled like weed and fried chicken with Hoff, his best friend, Hoff's girlfriend Heidi, and their 2 pit bulls, Tango and Sahara. The curtains looked like dried lemons, and there were only 3 channels on TV. I never thought of going back home, even after Hoff choked me. Thank you.
Wow, those are beautiful. Thank you, Sheila. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing Elizabeth Allua Vaah. Allua is the author of Mame, grew up in Bakanta, Western Ghana, and moved to Canada in 2010. Allua calls herself a maternal health migrant. She is co-founder of a maternal health advocacy group, an advocate of girl-child education, and a strong environmentalist. She lives in Brampton with her family. Welcome, Allua.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you, my fellow writers. Glad to be here. I'm very excited to be part of this group tonight. So I'm going to read to you a few sections from my book, Mame. Mame celebrates the resilience and strength and sacrifice of rural women. I have to differentiate that because there are people in the cities in Ghana who have no clue what happens in the rural areas. So here we go. And when this opening is Mame, who is actually in the middle of childbirth, her 4th child, and there's so much going on in the yard, and she sees that everyone is scared. So she's also scared. But in order to take her mind off the pain, she tries to reminisce about her childhood. So then she remembers a friend called Ebella, who had gone through some very, very bad situations. So let's go here. Ebella, of the slender figure, was considered the beauty of our time. She was married at 15 to an elderly man from our village. Oh, how jealous we were of her good fortune. Her husband was a self-made man with a big house in a big compound. He had 3 other wives, 2 of whom had children older than Ebella. Being married to a man of one's father's age or older is no girl's idea of a future. It wasn't that of Ebella and the rest of us girls of the village. But do we have a choice? Maybe, maybe not. Ebella was the talk of the town when she and the rest of the girls her age, including myself, were taken through the puberty rites. This is a rite of passage from childhood to adulthood and is performed for the girls shortly after their first menstrual period. For most girls, the first day of menstruation is the first they ever know that such a thing would actually happen to them. Sexuality and sex education are taboo subjects in my community. My older sister, Mua, told me of how one morning she woke up to find herself on a wet bed. She was sleeping on a raffia mat on the floor of her mother's hut with her 2 brothers, Angama and Enda, myself and Manu, my mother's 2nd daughter. At first, Mua thought she had wet herself. She was too ashamed to get out of bed, fearing that the rest of us would notice. Raffia mats do not absorb liquid. It either stays on the bed or goes straight under. Anyone lying nearby is likely to get wet also. Mua could count the number of times she had woken up from sleep because one of us had peed on the mat and had made all of us wet. Mua waited, pretending to be fast asleep, until the rest of us had woken up and made our way to the compound to start our chores. She fretted. She, the eldest girl, had wet the bed. Meanwhile, Nana was screaming her name, calling her to wake up and join the other girls to go to the river to draw water. Startled by Nana's bellowing, Mua jumped out of bed, covering her wet clothes with her hands. She looked down at her hands and realized that the wetness was not due to water, but blood. She started to sob. Nana could not help but come into the room and hold her. What is happening to me? Am I going to die? Have I caught a disease? Mua asked. Has she wronged someone or done anything to cause them to give her to one of the gods? Being given to the gods is actually something to be alarmed about. The gods impose a very stringent code of conduct on our village. They seem to be always waiting around for someone to bring a complaint against what Kwame or Amma had done. But they don't always need anyone to tell them. They know what people are doing all the time. A wrong move, a quarrel, even an unintended argument can bring one to the gods' attention, resulting in sickness, an accident, or even death. I am so sorry, Mommy, but I haven't done anything wrong, Mua cried. Nana looked at her scared face and said calmly, Mua, you are not going to die. Don't be afraid. This is normal. It is not a punishment from the gods. It shows that you are now a woman. I have been wondering when this was going to happen. I don't need a soothsayer to tell me where Nana is going now. In her mind, there's a reason for my prolonged labor, which we, mere mortals, are not able to understand. She takes 2 white eggs and 2 brown eggs, together with a pot of white clay, and heads off to Priestess Yaba's compound. Then I will do a quick one here. So when 3 months after our puberty rites, so Mua is still recollecting, Ebela is still recollecting her childhood. I heard that a suitor had come to ask for my friend Ebela's hand in marriage. I was torn. On one hand, I was happy for her. It was the expected next step after the puberty rites. With Ebela's good looks and her better family fortune, it was a no-brainer that she would find a suitor soon. Was I jealous? Yes, I was. Everyone in the village wanted to know who the man was. I had no doubt it would be the dashing young man, Mozum. He was about 19 years old, tall, well-built, with a strong chest, and already on track to taking after his father. From a very early age, Mozum had worked on his father's canoe. His father owned one of the 3 fishing canoes in a canoe, and so everyone expected him to be the one coming for her. Do I have any more time or? Okay.
About 3 more minutes.
Okay. So the thought of Mozum coming for Ebela made me smile. I began daydreaming about the other boys my friends and I had been singing about during the Enyima gatherings. Enyima, now that's one game that brings a smile to the face of many Nzima girls. Usually girls at ages 13 and over played it. It was when all the secrets came out. Since many girls were married off by age 17, the rest who came to play Enyima were usually between the ages of 11 and 17. So I remember clearly one night when we were playing and it got to Ebela's turn. She went into the center of the circle and started singing. Ayi mamingamingo, ayi mamingamingo, me kama hilewoke, me ye hilewoke. Ele palanya do mi humozwo ye. Ayo mamingamingo da. Translation, friend, let me tell you without a doubt, no matter how good you are not as good as my husband Mozum. Now, Ebela's mention of Mozum all of a sudden brought up a great deal of excitement. Many of us had already suspected that there might be something going on. Now that she had mentioned his name, it confirmed our suspicion that there had to be something going on between them, and the anticipation rose among us that after the puberty rites, he would be the one asking for her hand in marriage. Perhaps many of us saw such a match as a confirmation for our own expectations. The ability to marry someone we loved and could relate to, even play with, rather than the usual, being married to someone as old as your father. There was much disappointment then when it turned out that a Bele suitor was not Mozum. If the young man had any such thoughts, having to compete with a Jamechi, the prominent elder in the village, was a battle he was sure to lose. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I laughed a bit there. Next up, we have Wei Ning, who was born in downtown Toronto to Chinese immigrants who fed him a steady diet of bitter melon and kung fu movies. He's still a Torontonian at heart, learning to skate at Nathan Phillips Square and receiving his undergraduate degree of Toronto Metropolitan University. He remains a diehard Leafs, Jays, and Raptors fan. Ing moved to Ottawa to attend Carleton University, graduating with an MSW, and now works as a social worker with the Ottawa Catholic School Board. He lives to write, travel, eat, and play, preferably all at the same time. He's an award-winning author and travel writer who continues to push his boundaries from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Author of Letters from Johnny, The Family Code, 2023, and Finding the Way, a novel of Lao Tzu. Wayne, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Dorian, and to the rest of the Brockton crew for having me and for supporting the many writing communities out there. We really appreciate that. So Letters from Johnny is a work of historical fiction with many biographical elements of my childhood as the son of Chinese immigrants in downtown Toronto in 1970. I'll let you do the math. It's a deceptive little book written in letter form by an 11-year-old protagonist. So if you think, just based on the looks of the book, that it's MG, middle grade, you might not be entirely incorrect, but I didn't write it for the kiddies, and I'm glad people didn't judge it based on its simple cover, because it was recently named the best crime novella by the Crime Writers of Canada, and it's been endorsed by the Historical Novel Society in the next chapter. So, actually the cover really helps put things into context. And I have to mention that it was my wife who designed this. She's listening upstairs. And my nephew Avery illustrated it, and Guernica Editions cleaned it up. So if you look at just the cover, you just, it's just a boy writing a letter, except when do you ever see boys writing letters anymore? And when do you ever see a chalkboard? And when do you ever see a maple leaf sweater with the number 14? So it helps the reader put this into historical context. This is not the here and now. This is 1970. Number 14 is the sweater of the greatest Toronto Maple Leaf of all time, Dave Keon. For those who don't know, nowadays it would be, I think, Austin Matthews sweaters everywhere except in Ottawa. Just another hint about the cover. If you didn't know this was historical, there is a date at the very top right corner of the blackboard, and it says October 17, 1970. It's the day after Pierre Trudeau enacted the War Measures Act, sending soldiers into the streets of Montreal and Ottawa. And it's the day Quebec Cabinet Minister Pierre Laporte's body was found, stuffed into a trunk of a car, strangled by his FLQ captors. Not exactly middle grade stuff, right? So the FLQ crisis just went nuclear. At first, this matters nothing to my protagonist, Johnny, because the Leafs are playing the Rangers that night, right? Except if you were around back then, you couldn't escape the FLQ crisis. And for Johnny, he couldn't escape also a neighborhood murder, his family imploding, him being betrayed by a best friend, him being bullied, him being a victim of racism. So the only way that Johnny could make any sense of this is first through letters to a pen pal, then to Dave Keon. So about these letters, there's dozens of them, 46 actually. I'm going to read you 3 of them, and they're going to be abbreviated. There are dozens of intentional grammatical, spelling, and punctuation errors. That's not poor editing, that's intentional. So I've heavily edited this to enhance your listening pleasure. So Here we go. September 21, 1970. Dear Pen Pal, my name is Johnny Wong. I am in grade 5 and I go to Ord Street Public School and I live in Toronto. Mrs. Clover is my teacher. She said I have to do a writing project, like write to a pen pal. She said her pen pal is like a best friend in a faraway place. She said she will exchange these letters with the grade 5 class in Idaho. I'm sorry, but I have a real friend now. His name is Raleigh. He rents a room beside us, except we have the biggest room in the house, and we share the bathroom with him and the kitchen with him and 2 other university students. Raleigh's rich. He buys and sells and trades shiny things like forks and jewels and really old money. My mother likes that I have a friend who does not tease me. Raleigh's very kind. Sometimes I want to call him Dad, but my for real father is in Vancouver. It was Raleigh who gave me my first pack of hockey cards. Now I have 90 cards. Someday I hope to get a Dave Keon rookie card. So I do not need another friend unless you can make the new student, Barry Arbel, stop calling me names and getting me into trouble. Your friend, Johnny Wong. September 29, 1970. Dear Pen Pal, yesterday after dinner, I went to Raleigh's room. He showed me his new acquisition, a color TV. You know what? Sorry, wrong letter. Let's try another one. October 4, 1970. Dear Pen Pal, when I got home from school yesterday, the street was filled with police cars and an ambulance. The ambulance people carried a body covered up. I thought, this is my first for real dead body I've ever seen. Have you ever seen a dead body? Then I thought, who else could it be but Meanie Ming? Soon, all the children and grown-ups in the neighborhood came and they were very nice to me and they asked me what happened. Because I did not know, all I could say that it was Meanie Ming. Then Barry Arbel came on his bike. He said, I must have killed her with my ugly looks. All the children laughed. I wanted to smack him, but my mother came running out of the house and dragged me inside. I looked out the window. Barry was still talking to people like it was his side of the street, except he lives down on Baldwin, so this is my side of the street. Then mother holded my hand so tight that it hurt. She made me promise to not get involved and stay away from police and to say nothing. Then, starting with our house, the police went and talked to everybody on the street. Raleigh was not home yet. Mother told the police she heard nothing and saw nothing. The police put yellow tape around the house. I was going to tell mother about the fight between Meanie Ming and the Catwoman, but she gave me something. It was a letter. She said it was from my useless father. When my mother says somebody is useless, it's the worst thing she can say about anybody. Then she said some swear words in Chinese that I cannot say to you. In the letter, father said he was good and hoped to come home soon. He told me to study hard, to listen to mother, to always tell the truth, and to stay out of trouble. Mother did not let me go out that night. This time I listened, your friend, Johnny Wong. Now we skip up to October 18, 1970, and now he's writing to Dave Keon. Dear Mr. Keon, today at recess, I pushed Patty Biso into a puddle of water. I know I promised I would be like you, Mr. Keon, and not fight and not hit any girls because that's wrong. But I was going for Barry Arbel because he called me a stupid thief and a murderer. I tried to tell him it was Raleigh who double-crossed me and is the real thief and the real murderer, plus a liar. He would not listen, and the other kids started to chant, good grief, Johnny's a thief. So I chased him around the yard and suddenly and accidentally pushed Patty Biso. I wanted to wish Barry Arbel would die. Then I remembered Meanie Ming died after I wished her dead. So I was not sure anymore. Then the lunch monitor came and took me to that big fat liar, Principal Ingalls, who was smoking and listening to the radio about the FLQ strangling a hostage to death and then stuffing him in a car near the airport in Montreal yesterday. He pressed his cigarette into an ashtray and said, what the hell do they want? Damn frog bastards. I hope they catch them and hang them by their nuts. I started to giggle. Then the lunch monitor cleared her throat and told him about me kicking Patty Biso. I thought he was going to yell at me and take out the ruler, but instead, he turned the radio down and put on a smile that never moved. He asked me how I was. It was really weird because I know he hates me. I thought it was a trap. He asked me about Mother and her friends. I said Mother was fine. He said he knew that the police were still looking for that no-good commie, draft-dodging, murdering thief, Raleigh. I wanted to say, yes, it's him, Raleigh, and not me who's the thief and the murderer. Please tell everybody in the school. Instead, I said nothing, because I guessed he wanted a reward for catching Raleigh and thought maybe I knew where he was. He put a hand on my shoulder and said I could talk to him about anything. It was like he was playing a good cop, except he was also a bad cop. So I asked him what the FLQ was. His smile went away. He said, those are frog bastard terrorists. And then he got all red and said, they're trying to separate from the country and stick it to the English. But the army, they're going to kick their asses. Sorry, Mr. Kian, but that's what he said, not me. I think he saw that he used bad words and stopped himself. I did not understand everything else, but I did not like it. I think he was making fun of people from Quebec, and that includes you. He said to forget what I just heard, and that all I need to know was that our commie Prime Minister, Trudeau, is a gunslinger, who said, just watch me. And then Mr. Ingalls raised his voice and said, well, I'm watching. The whole goddamn country's watching. Calling in the army was brilliant. I'll give him that. You might get this right after all. I returned to class. Mrs. Clover was talking about the news, and she also said Prime Minister Trudeau would fix the problem in Quebec and asked if anybody heard about what was going on. I raised my hand. She said it was nice of me to join the class. I raised my hand higher. Then she looked away like it was now me setting a trap because I never raised my hand, but this time I was really listening and I knew the answer. She pretended to not see me, but nobody else raised the hand, and I could not hold it in, so I said, frog bastards kidnapped somebody and then he got stuffed in a car. Everybody laughed except her. She said murder's not funny, and she should send me to the office for that language. But I talked back, and I said the principal said it first, and also thinks the commie will fix it. Then I wanted to ask her what a commie was, but I did not. Then she said, you seem to know a lot about murder, but I think she was saying about what happened to Ming, like it was my fault and not about this murder in Montreal. This made everybody laugh again. But this time I got really mad. So for the rest of the day, I pretended like she was invisible. Were your teachers mean to you too, Mr. Keon? Your friend, Johnny Wong. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wayne. I think I had a Barry Arville in my school too. Thank you, that was great. Next up, we have Joelle Barron, a poet who lives on the traditional territory of Anishinaabe of Treaty 3 and the Métis people, which is also Fort Frances, Ontario. Their first poetry collection, Ritual Lights, was nominated for the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award. In 2019, Barron was a finalist for the Dane Ogilvy Prize for Emerging LGBTQ Writers. Welcome, Joelle.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much to the organizers. This is a huge amount of work to put this together. I'm about as far from Toronto as you can be while still being in Ontario, so it's quite magical for me to be able to be here. So I'm going to start with a poem from my book, Ritual Lights. I asked my extremely sweet and dear friend DF if they would select the poem for me to read tonight, and they chose the poem Two Virgos. Hermits of the tarot, I daydream about reading your cards somewhere on a rainy afternoon. Remember when I kissed you after Pride, then passed out drunk? Now we're 2 provinces apart. You don't want children. I already have one. You sent valerian tea for my birthday. I sent flowers for yours, wafts of peony, bluebells. The tea was meant to soothe me. Or maybe you just had it lying around like my aunt who keeps a closet of gifts for no one in particular. Valerian calms, but my cheeks are flushed, heart beating a hummingbird quick. I believe there's a universe where we knit together on the couch, toes barely touching, quietly sipping from twin mugs of heat. And that poem is about the first openly queer person who was openly interested in me, which was very special. And I kind of screwed it up really badly, but luckily we're still friends. So the next one is called The Witch in the Stone Boat, and it's after an Icelandic fairy tale of the same name. High noon shreds the fibers of my lips. Empty cooler, floating insect limbs, wing of fly, leg of spider, stringer of walleye, apathetic off the port side, color fading from their bodies as they bump against the hull, nylon slimed through their tender jaws. My husband cast from his camo seat, testicle leaking from his camo shorts, sweat lagooning philtrum. Her shape overtakes the horizon, swift as terror, skimming still water on solid granite. Dynamite blasted like rock cuts, all arm muscle, her shoulders roiling like a nest of snakes. Her skin is furred like a fresh antler and makes its own daytime. Seen only by me, she comes aboard, drops a fish's eye behind my teeth. I explore its jelly edges with my tongue. At home, a woman with my face rises through the floor. I want her to leave, but she hovers in the hallway like a light fixture. I divorce pickerel from their skins, squinting in the glow of her skirts. My husband tells me I should hang more of her. I yawn, and his screaming is a mirror. He can see the witch inside, my throat widening like a cervix to release her. And the original fairy tale is about, I can't remember if she's a princess or a queen, but she gets kidnapped from her husband's ship while they're sailing from kingdom to kingdom, and her husband has to rescue her. And I thought it might be interesting if instead of being kidnapped, she went willingly, and then her and the witch like fell in love and hooked up. So, and I'm lucky enough to work sometimes with the poet George Murray, and he says that my poetry is Northwestern Ontario Gothic, so that's going on a little bit there as well. I have another sort of fairy tale-ish one. It's called That Night the Moon Was a Spinning Wheel. I'm sleeping. We're 16, listening to several small animals and admiring the several small animals he brings. Wounded whiskey jacks, Luna moths, plastic bags full of bright fish. Rubs white pills between his fingertips, embeds them in my memory, seeds of a future dream. I'm sleeping. He lets himself in through the library door. He's been gone for 9 years and I wasn't expecting him. Bloodless fingers, cool skin shining like my nightmares of his recurring death. I do as I've been taught and kiss him until he seems real. I'm sleeping, mouth open. Festival of snowflakes lets loose onto my tongue in his parents' hot tub, silver bells aching through the waterproof speakers. I propose to him, flakes dying like fairies in the heat. He takes me up to his childhood bedroom, ties me to the bed with a bass amp cord. I'm sleeping, deliver him daily to the OATC, watch him through a rip in the reflective window covering. Oh, a brilliant void above me, full moon obscured by snow-fattened clouds. After, he asks me if I want to steal a lawn ornament, as if a decade hasn't passed. I'm sleeping. He gives me a brief sun. Shards of brown snow heap around us at the hospital, layered like time. We are children and married and ended in the space of a second, constant shape of a syringe in his pocket. I can't wake up, even after pricking my finger on the tip. Excuse me. I'm really interested in taking traumatic events in my life and turning them into some sort of mythology. It feels healing, I guess. This next one is called Aphrodite to Sappho, 2017. Pale green of sea dust on Lake Huron, crush of zebra mussels, fragile coffins. Stars like branches of malachite cast their acicular beams, stringers of light dripping down the backs of our necks. All day I collected samples of humanity's myopia along receding coastline, and I've become voracious. So let me lay you down on this bed of invasive species, exult in your many ridged ceilings. Send a prayer to freshwater gods that we might somehow braid our DNA, give birth to a clutch of coral orbs, a restoration of trout, skins freckled and sleek. My dad is from Manitoulin Island, so I of course have a fascination with Lake Huron. Okay, this is the last one that I have for this evening. I'm trained as a birth doula, and the most magical thing to me about being present with somebody who's giving birth is experiencing sympathy contractions. I think it's incredible how our bodies communicate with each other through space and time in that way. So this poem is based on those experiences, and it's called Overboard. Harlequin Great Dane topples from our patient's mobile home at the sound of ambulance tires down gravel drive. Wipers snapping, beauty bays water frantic in the shadow of the neighbor's airplane hangar. Outrageous dog vermiculating across the lawn, impossible cow, its sepulchral chest. Black and white like Goldie Hawn's swimsuit and overboard that showed all of her vulva but the slit. Patient at the door, colossally pregnant, voice snatched by her neighbor's amphibious aircraft, taking off across the water on keen pontoons. Are we all leaning into the vibration? Walls and bloody shelves of our bodies pulsing, shock of sympathy contractions, dog now hurling its body at the lake. Blood chucking it down the rift in our patient's bathrobe, silent light show behind us, everything about to split. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joelle. That was fantastic. I think it was Carrie Fisher who said, take your broken heart and make it into art. And yeah, I love the idea of putting trauma through the lens of mythology. I think that's really, or putting it through a sieve of mythology. That's a that's a really cool way to mark life. Thank you so much, all of our readers. And thank you, all of our audience out there. Thank you for providing your questions in the comments. Please continue to do so. If you have a question now, please type it in. Please note we'll only read questions that are respectful of our authors and their work and that do not promote any sort of oppression. And who do we have first? Do we have any questions coming in immediately? Or shall I ask the question that I'm sure we're all asking after Anna's presentation? What sort of class or lesson or schooling would you dream up and take next? What would be your perfect course that you would take? Anybody can respond, including Anna. Welcome to join the Q&A as well here. So I'd like to hear, if you could take a magical course, what would it be?
I'll get started. I wish I had taken an MFA. I hear what you say, Anna. It's not required. It's not necessary for career building and to build your confidence. But for somebody who started late in writing, who didn't take it as seriously and wasn't as committed, I feel like I have a lot of catching up to do. And if I could turn back the clock, I wish I had taken it back then. Now I'm fiercely taking courses online, listening to all sorts of podcasts, and I see I have weaknesses in my writing, many weaknesses, but one of which is probably around point of view. So I'd want to take something focused specifically on that. But there are just so many aspects to writing and to the business side of writing. And I think, writers need to understand, and readers need to understand, that writing isn't just about writing. There's so many elements to it, whether it's the developmental side, the research, the actual writing, the redrafting, the editing, the promotion, the marketing, there's just so many legs, and nobody ever talks about those. And nobody ever told me about any of that until I got published and realized, oh, I have to sell this thing and I have to get a whole lot better, and I need to work on point of view. So a really good course on POV would be fantastic for me, for my needs anyway.
Sheila or Allua or Joelle, do you have any things that you would dream up and take if you could, or maybe you are already taking courses, or maybe you've taken a course that was splendid?
I just have to say, like any sort of writing courses that or creative is just really, I just feel at home, and it just makes me, it's like, it's really healing for me. I utilize art as healing, as most of us do, or whether we know it or not. And anything that involves writing that's really challenging. And I can't help but relate to you, Anna Lee, when you were talking about earlier about, I would produce something and I was like, oh my God, I'm just so good. This is just so fabulous. Why am I not a bestseller author? And then I look at it like even a week later, and you're just like, you cringe, which just goes to show that there's always something to learn. And it's really nice to always just connect and be part of the community and all of that, right? And also just writing outside of the university environment, because it could also be very colonized and patriarchal, but there's also a lot to learn there. But just going out there and connecting with other writers, that's like heavenly home for me, I have to say.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I was a total disaster human during my MFA. So if I could go back in time and redo it now that I'm less of a disaster human, I would probably enjoy that. But yeah, I will literally do anything that just gets me in a room with other writers. It's really the community aspect of it that I find so amazing and so helpful, and what I miss. Quite isolated up where I am. So yeah, really just anything that gets me together with other writer friends.
Yeah, I did finance for a living, but I find myself, moving further and further towards writing. I said, if I had a way, maybe I would have been a journalist, probably because of the writing aspect of it. And I keep scouring for writing courses, and just have to make sure that I find something I can do. I do love that side of of it. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Henry Ward in the chat. This is a question specifically for Wayne. Why did you set the novel in 1970?
Oh, I think there's a couple of different answers to that. But there's a common thread to everything that we've said tonight, and that's that writing is healing. Whether Sheila or Elizabeth, you didn't come right out and say, but I know you're driven by nostalgia and a longing, and we're all searching for an identity. We're all trying to reconcile things. And in 1970, I was a child, and there was a lot of things that happened, many of which are on the pages. But it was also a tumultuous time in Toronto's history. It was still fairly innocent. We're still caught up in straight waspy ways, but that was starting to shed. Our immigration laws had changed, so the community was changing over. So you had a community that was coming of age. You had Johnny, who was coming of age because he's 11 and there's so much going on in his life. And then you had a country that was coming of age because of the FLQ crisis. So we had three parallel coming of age stories intertwined. And I couldn't do that unless it was 1970 because of the FLQ. I mean, I could have used other external events to just sort of ramp up and level up all the other sub stories. But 1970 worked really well for me because I was a child, the FLQ crisis, and Toronto really was a community also going through a metamorphosis. And there were a couple of other events in the 70s that really stood out for me, but that's the one that I really wanted to focus on. And 1970 was still, you know, pretty groovy and innocent, but that was all a veneer. And I tried to go beneath that veneer and highlight some of the darker issues which Johnny is exposed to. And like I said, 1970 was just a really good period to highlight that. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Wayne. We have another question. We've had a wide spread of literary genres and styles represented today. Is there any genre or style that you haven't experimented much with yet that you'd like to approach one day? Poetry, creative nonfiction, YA or middle grade, subgenres of fiction. What would be out of your comfort zone that's really tantalizing out there?
I'll jump in. I always thought, I tried and I always thought that writing romance novels will be easy because it's, you know, especially after reading that 50 Shades of Grey, I think. And I was like, you know, this will be a good way to retire is to write just something like this. And how hard can it be? And it is hard. And that would be something that I would kind of like to tap into because, you know, like who doesn't like romance and, you know, romantic sex, right? So yeah, that would have been fun. And also science fiction. Science fiction would be nice to write, and maybe if I can explore the rest of my brain and produce something just so it just seems such a different world, literally and figuratively, and that would be something that I would really like to develop and explore.
I'll jump in. Good for you, Sheila. I always found science fantasy or science fiction to be, oh my God, you have to build worlds. And like, that sounds like, give me straight up research, dull research, but building a world is it's mammoth. Everything I've written has been made me feel uncomfortable. And that's why I've written that. I mean, my first novel was set in ancient China with, you know, an ancient Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, as the protagonist. I knew very little about Taoism. I grew up with it, but it's not the kind of thing that I practiced, preached, or lived with. But it brought me back to my roots. So that's not the kind of writing. It was very literary, and that's generally not my wheelhouse. And then, you know, the voice of an 11-year-old is a very difficult thing to write or to voice. In my second book and in my third book, again, I'm out of my wheelhouse, white female character. I'm a long way from that. So I had to do I had to be really uncomfortable writing many aspects of it. I had to consult with a lot of people. So I think I'm drawn to things that make me learn, force me to explore, and allow me to just sort of grow and be uncomfortable. I'm still not ready for the science fantasy like Sheila, but maybe some creative nonfiction someday. I think I'd like to give that a try.
Who's next? Who hasn't answered the question? Allua?
Yeah, I haven't tried to when I've written, and I have one that I'm in the process of writing. I don't know if I want to place it in any specific bucket, right? I'm trying to write and pour out things that I want the world to know. I want people to be interested in. So I can't tell whether it's. I can put it in a specific bucket. And it's something I haven't tried at all or looked at is poetry. And that's something that I'd probably be interested in looking into, because you're able to put tidbits out that really, you know, I listened to what Joelle read, and it's like you have a whole lot in a small few verses. that really tell a lot. So that's something that I'd be interested in looking at, but I haven't really paid attention to yet.
I'd really like to write a children's book because I have a child and I think it would impress her. And that's literally the only reason. So.
Anna, do you want to chime in too? You write mainly poetry. Is there something else that you're going to put in your TBW list?
To be written. Yeah. I would agree. Allua, I definitely, your response resonated that it's less the genre that I feel clear about and more sort of like content happens and then it sort of goes into a genre. And so I definitely do not, I feel like that I don't feel as clear about a specific genre and then it happens. It feels much more like the writing feels clear and then it grows from there. I feel really interested in things that are sort of like bending across genres, and so feel like that's got some really interesting potential and possibility to it. And I think it's what really draws me to poetry as well, is that I feel like it really tries to bend language, and so feel quite fascinated by the way that people are doing that. And in terms of courses, I definitely try to always have my eye open for courses that are being offered or workshops that are being offered by writers who I think are doing really intriguing things. And so tend to try to watch for, is someone offering something that I think I can really learn from, or whose work is, just doing really disrupting language in ways that I think is quite fascinating. So I sort of try and keep an eye on what's moving in that area.
Okay, we have one more question from the chat for all the writers. When you write biographically, do you feel you have to stick to the facts, or are you open to changing the facts to suit the artistic effort?
So I love writing poetry because you're not beholden to stick to the facts. My poetry mentor was very much a proponent of like, do what's good for the poem. And what literally exactly happened in real life isn't always what's good for the poem. And I've found many, many times that I've like broken into a poem that way when I've been willing to make it more of a narrative and less of exactly the facts that happened. But I also know some poets that like have a problem with that. Like they find it really important to stick to the facts when they're being biographical. But I like that poetry is a slippery genre.
Yeah, I can chip in here. So in Mami, I'm capturing a number of things that either happened or have happened before or are bound to happen, given the way people see things. Somebody is sick and it's like, oh, this person has taken her to the gods, or this person had cursed that person. So when I weave them all together, it's not like I can't go and say ABC did this and that's why that guy is dead. No, but I can pick pieces from here and there and then come up with the story that I'm looking to tell. So I call this a fiction, but you would see that if you lived among the people for like a month, you will see all of these tidbits coming together. And so is it fiction or is it nonfiction? You take it the way you want it to take it. But I call it fiction because you can't say ABC actually did all of that. So that's how I go about it.
I think similarly to Allua, if you call it a work of fiction, that's almost your disclaimer before the start of a movie. Yeah, so like, however, anything that can be fact-checked should be correct. With Letters from Johnny, one of my best friends fact-checked one of the hockey scores on me. One of my best friends. Fortunately, I got it right. With my first novel, it's a fictionalized account of Lao Tzu, meaning Confucius. There's very little written on these two individuals. You'd think there'd be a lot to draw from, but there's very little. So it's a complete work of fiction. It was almost like world building because there was so little written about that period, because it's 2,500 years. No, it's 3,000 years ago. No, 2,500 years ago. So if somebody wants to nail me on the facts on that, great. I'd love to see them for myself because I've never been able to find them. In my next novel, which my editor just went over, she fact-checked me on all sorts of details. Like one of the characters got involved in the sex trade, and I listed prices for, the business, and like, she was meticulous about it. And she said, you know what, you have to get these things right. But aspects of her life and how she acts and decisions she's making, that's completely fictionalized, and that can't be fact-checked. So really, that's artistic prerogative, right? Big disclaimer, work of fiction.
Yeah, I just want to kind of jump off on Allua and sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but Allua and Wayne. My work is just like my tattoos, like the female figures tattoos that I have are me, but it's not exactly me. And so I was like, yeah, I'm also vain, but at the same time, like I write about what I know, whether it's poetry or stories, and they're all storytelling for me. But and everything that from the male characters to even like the dogs, it's just like it's me. It's a reflection of myself. So I would say that my writing are all based on true events, but I will never write a biography anyway. Not, and like, who am I, right, really, to write a biography? But it's all based on life experiences and true events. And when you talk about like facts, like fact checks, and that's where my university training comes in, becomes very useful, because I learn about like how important it is to do your proper research, and also not to disrespect or appropriate information or knowledge, especially if you're writing about different cultures or other people. And so I always just keep that in mind, because I was also an Indigenous major, a studies major, and I learned so much about appropriation and just respect for sacred rights, and the stories of people and the and just ways of life, and respecting that, and before really cannibalizing other people's story or taking credit for that. Like at the same, there's so much to navigate, and I had no idea how, because writing is a different world. It's your world, but at the same time, you also share this world with other people, whether you want to or not. But so we always have to write with meaning, with respect, and just being mindful. So that's my take on that.
Wow, fantastic answers all around. Thank you so much. We have time for just one more quick question to all of you. It's the question we ask all of our Brockton readers as they come in. Can you please give us a book that you'd recommend that we read? Something that moved you, it could be something recent, something you read in the last year, something that you've got on your bedside table right now. Let us know what we should be reading, something you think we should put our eyes on.
So in the days of the butterfly, I don't know if that's the right, if I have the full thing, but that book, it stayed with me. I watched the movie and I still want to watch it again and read it again. So that's the book I'll go for.
I recently reread for like the 20th time the poetry collection Renaissance Normcore by Adele Barkley. It's just really brilliant. And if I can just sneak in a second one, Anna McCaskill's new collection, Shadow Blight, is also extremely brilliant. It's about miscarriage, and I've never read miscarriage written about in quite that way. So those are my recommendations.
I'm going to go with Lindsey Wong's The Woo Woo. Some of you may have heard of it. I think it made the Canada Reads long list, short lists, might have even won. I can't remember, a few years back. the reason I'm selecting that one is, you know, most BIPOC immigrant type stories are quiet stories where the characters are almost quietly heroic, honorable, and, you know, very humble, and everybody gets along. In Lindsey Wong's The Woo Woo, it is so in your face. You know, it's I think it's one of the rare Asian inspired and focused books where they boldly air their laundry out in public, and incorporating mental health and Asian culture, which you just don't see. So she bared her soul and took enormous personal risk in doing so. So I have nothing but respect for her for doing that, but also for bringing to the forefront in an incredibly dark and humorous way issues that aren't talked about enough in many immigrant communities, because not everybody is a success, you know, type story. And this is a family that clearly struggled in so many ways, and she struggled publicly by turning her story into a best-selling memoir. So my hat's off to Lindsey Wong.
I think that leaves Anna.
Oh, great. I wasn't sure. I always recommend Dion Brand's The Blue Clerk, or anything by Dion Brand, but certainly The Blue Clerk, which I feel like is such a like workshop itself in writing. Also, I just recently read The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa and was like completely like metamorphosized in what writing can do. So would definitely also recommend The Memory Police. And it's so great to get the other recommendations that folks are saying.
Wonderful. That was great. That was everyone, right? I think we heard from everyone. Okay.
Did we get Sheila's recommendation?
Did we get Sheila?
Oh, I'll just quickly say Thomas King. Anything by Thomas King, but especially The Truth About Stories. That was the first reading I read in my first class in my first year in university ever. And it just really changed my life, and it made me the writer that I am, because I realized that you can change your stories. And which kind of segue into the first question before, but you can change the narrative and rewrite your story, and stop listening to all these stories that so negatively impacted you, whether it's race, it's trauma, you as a woman, all these things, the misogyny and all that. Stop and write your own story, and change your life. And it really has changed my life. So if you have time to read The Truth About Stories by Thomas King, please do so.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our readers for being here tonight. This was really a lovely night full of really powerful writing, and I think we'll all remember it for a long time. And thank you to all of our viewers on YouTube. Our next Brockton will be September 14th, 2022. In September, if all goes according to plan, we will return in person to Glad Day Bookshop in downtown Toronto. Really looking forward to this, because I won't do things like forget to turn my camera on and have bandwidth issues and various other things. So fingers crossed it goes well, and we will be back in person at Glad Day. On that date, we'll hear from Kathy Friedman on developing a writing practice while living with mental illness. And we'll have readings by Kimia Esla, Jennifer Hossein, Oboya Usman, and Brockton Writers Series founder Farzana Doctor. We plan to record and post to our YouTube channel so we can keep up all the good things that came from, pivoting online. And so our dear audience can stay tuned for Brockton goodness from near or far. Thank you so much to the writers, readers, listeners, and supporters. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, do that before you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.